On the first morning at Vaethos, Proctor told us the Institute had never produced a cadet who hadn't been broken. He said it the way someone announces a weather pattern, not a threat, just a fact about the climate. The fracture protocol, he explained, was the Institute's foundational method, graduated psychological pressure, applied in sequence, until the students' constructed self gave way, and the core underneath was visible. Then the rebuilding began. Every species had a different fracture signature. Every cadet had a threshold. The proctor's job, he had performed without exception for 19 years, was to find it. He looked at me when he said, without exception, not with malice. Professional interest, the way a craftsman eyes an unusual piece of wood. I was the only human at Vaethos. I'd arrived on an interspecies youth exchange that the Institute's administration had approved, largely because the paperwork described humans as resilient, moderately adaptable, subapex. The proctor had read the file. He scheduled my protocol session last as a courtesy, he said. Humans, in his experience, which was entirely theoretical, because I was the first, were fragile in ways that didn't show up in the intake scans. He didn't want me watching the others and catastrophizing. I said that was fine. I had nowhere else to be. First cadet to fracture was a Velron named Osketh on day 2. The Velron were silicon-framed, triple-lunged, built for pressure environments that would liquefy a human in seconds. Osketh went into the protocol chamber at first light and came out 4 hours later walking differently. Something in his posture had shifted below the load-bearing line, and he spent the next 2 days in the recovery suite while the proctor's assistants began the rebuild work. Osketh didn't seem ashamed. Among the Velron, fracture was the right. You weren't a soldier until you'd been taken apart and put back together by someone who knew what the pieces were for. I understood the logic. I just didn't share the architecture. On day 3, 2 Kethavar cadets went through together. The Kethavar bonded in pairs, and their protocol was run in tandem, each watching the other reach their limit. It took 6 hours. When they emerged, they were holding each other's secondary arms. One of them was laughing quietly through something that wasn't quite tears. The proctor filed his notes and moved to the next name on the board. I watched all of it from the common room. Not because I was required to. The other cadets generally kept to their quarters before their sessions, because I was curious, and because the common room had the best window, and the light through Vaethos's atmosphere had this quality in the late afternoon of turning everything the color of old copper, and I found it settling. Sarath noticed me there on day 4. When the last of the non-human cadets was completing her session, he stopped in the corridor outside the common room and watched me for a moment through the glass. I nodded at him. He didn't nod back. He made a note on his board and kept walking. Day 6, he came for me. The protocol chamber was smaller than I'd expected. A pale room, slightly too warm, with a single chair in the center, and a bank of environmental controls along the left wall. The proctor sat across from me. His assistant stood at the controls. There were no instruments attached to me, no wires. The Therath method was purely environmental and conversational. They'd refined it over centuries, and it worked by layering. The physical environment shifted: temperature, air pressure, light frequency. And then the proctor talked, and the combination was calibrated to erode the specific psychological structures that held a given species' sense of self together. He started with the temperature. I noticed it drop, then rise. He asked me about loss. Standard opening, I assumed. The protocol's first layer was designed to surface whatever a cadet was most afraid of losing. I told him about the 3 years I'd spent in the Kessler Basin resettlement camps after the eastern seaboard floods, which was true. I had thought about so many times, and from so many angles, that it no longer had any particular charge. It was just a thing that had happened. We'd lost the house, then the city, then the shape of what the next 10 years were supposed to look like. We'd figured it out. Most people had. The proctor's assistants made adjustments. The light shifted into a frequency range that, according to the intake file for humans, triggered low-grade threat response. I was aware of it, the way you're aware of a slightly uncomfortable chair. Present, noted, not particularly actionable. He moved to the second layer, isolation protocols, a series of environmental cues designed to produce the felt sense of total aloneness, combined with questions calibrated to surface whatever a cadet used as their internal anchor. For the Velron, it was community. The Kethavar, it was their paired bond. He asked me what I held on to. I thought about it honestly. Habit, mostly, I said. When things get bad enough, you stop asking whether you can handle it, and just handle it. That's not a philosophy. It's just what you do when the alternative isn't available. He was quiet for a moment. The assistants ran the third layer. The full environmental sequence, pressure and light and subsonic tone, which I could feel in my back teeth and in the base of my sternum. It was genuinely unpleasant. I breathed through it. Not a technique. I'd never been trained in any of this. Just the ordinary human response to discomfort, which is to find a rhythm and stay in it until the discomfort changes, or you do. The proctor watched me breathe. He ran the sequence again. I watched the copper light through the room's single high window shift toward the blue of early evening. At the end of the third sequence, Sareth Kull set his board down on the table between us. He looked at me for a long time, without saying anything. His species' facial musculature didn't map cleanly onto human expression, but I'd had 6 days to watch him, and what I read there was not frustration. It was closer to bewilderment, the specific bewilderment of a craftsman who has done everything correctly and arrived at a result the method doesn't account for. "You haven't reached your threshold," he said. "No," I agreed. "Every cadet has a threshold." I didn't argue with him. It seemed unkind. "I think," I said, "the thing you're looking for might have already been located. A long time ago. By circumstances that didn't ask permission first." He picked his board back up. He made a note. A long one. Longer than any I'd seen him write. Then he stood and walked to the door and stopped there with his hand on the frame. "The protocol has a rebuild phase," he said. "Cadets who fracture. I know. There is no procedure for cadets who don't." "No," I said. "I imagine not." He was quiet again then. "You will need to report to the advanced integration track tomorrow morning. I will have the paperwork filed by dawn." I thanked him. He left. I sat in the pale room for a while longer, watching the last of the copper light go out of the sky. Proctor had spent 19 years finding the bottom of people, the place where the constructed self gave way, and the raw thing underneath was exposed. He was good at it. He'd built a career on the understanding that everyone had such a place. He wasn't wrong exactly. I had one too. It had just been found already, a long time ago, by floodwater and displacement, and the specific grinding patience of years that don't resolve neatly. By the time I sat down in that chair, there wasn't much left to break. What was underneath had been doing the load-bearing work for a while. Picked up my jacket and walked back to the common room. The copper light was gone. The window showed stars. Vaethos' sky was thick with them, foreign constellations that I still hadn't learned to read. I sat down and looked at them anyway.